Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion, and coming to you from one of the legendary booths of Chasens restaurant. This, growing up and reading about old Hollywood, this was the place to be. In 1995, it closed, but the man who started it, Dave Chasen, was actually an actor who realized there were a lot of actors in this town, and his friend Frank Capra, who was a famous director, said, "Why don't you start a restaurant?" So he started up Chasens. Started out as kind of a southern barbecue place where you could get barbecue and chili, and turned into a fine dining restaurant. Today we're going to go to Dave and Maude Chasen's grave. I'm going to show you where Chasens was and what's left of it. And we're going to go out to the Reagan Presidential Library, and we're going to see the famous booth that was the Ronald and Nancy Reagan booth. They had their first blind date here, and ended up, Ronald proposed to Nancy in that booth, and thanks to the Reagan Library, they're going to let me show it to you today. So, Daze, the Jordan the Lion, and you all, it begins right now. Well, my friends, here it is, the historic front entryway of Chasens Restaurant. Opened in 1936 by Dave Chasen. He actually started out as a vaudeville performer, got a gig out here in a Betty Grable movie, and while he was on vaudeville, he used to make chili for everyone in his dressing room. And once he got out here, he started to notice there were a ton of actors just like him trying to become the next big star, and so he decided to change his profession. And there was a cornfield here. He bought some of the property, and next thing you know, Chasens was born. Now, it became a hangout for all of the elite celebrities from pretty much then on. Clark Gable would hang out here, and Don Amici, if you know Don Amici from, I mean, gosh, what, Cocoon, Trading Places, I mean, he's been in tons and tons of stuff. He once brought his date here named Maude, and they were coming here quite often, to where Maude actually said, one day I said, "Don't you know any other restaurants that you can bring me to?" And he said, "Yeah, I do, but this is the best one." And Maude ended up falling in love with Dave Chasen and married Dave Chasen and became the eternal hostess here at Chasens. Now, unfortunately, in 1995 they closed, and mainly the reason they closed was because the times had changed. You know, this was a fine dining restaurant, which is kind of interesting to think of, because when it first started, they were known for mainly two things: barbecue and their chili. And most of us now, if we've ever heard of Chasens, we know it's because Elizabeth Taylor loved this chili so much that she was having it flown into Rome when she was filming Cleopatra. And so they've always had a pretty heavy reputation for that. But this place also was, I mean, it was basically the place that everybody came. This wasn't just a dinner, this was a night out. This would originally have had red carpet. People would have driven up right here where this freaking tree is. No respect at all. They got this tree here right where the entryway into the famous Chasens would have been. I mean, there would have been a door here with glass that had a big C on there, and as soon as you walked in, Maude would have greeted you and walked you to your table. Now, her office was actually, and Dave's office, was actually a little over to here, and they would take all of their most famous celebrities or their best friends in there to hang out when they were here. But like I said, this wasn't just a dinner place, this was an evening out. You dressed up, you came, you had the hobo steak, you had the escargot, you had the caviar, you had the chili, and you had the famous flaming martini. Now, this was a hangout for Gregory Peck, George Burns, Bob Hope, and even Ronald Reagan. In fact, Ronald Reagan at one point had a blind date with a woman here named Nancy Davis, and those two would fall in love. They would eventually become the First Lady and President of the United States, and they would have booth number 2 here named after them, and they would come here all the time, along with people like Debbie Reynolds. Like I said, Clark Gable would come here so often they actually used to have a picture inside Maude's office of Clark Gable, his wife Kay, and Dwight D. Eisenhower inside here. The Rat Pack would meet up here. Frank Sinatra was a frequent visitor here. Now, unfortunately, like I said, just the times changed. People didn't want to go out for fine dining. They didn't want to spend 3 or 4 hours hanging out and enjoying, you know, this kind of lifestyle. So Spago and various other restaurants opened up, La Dome, and celebrities started going there. So at one point, this was basically only the older generation celebrities coming here. They couldn't turn enough of a profit, and a mall developer bought the property, and originally they said that this was all going to be demolished and turned into a mall, but eventually it became a Bristol Farms, which it is now. Now, one of the cool things about this is that the city apparently fought for a little bit of Chasens to remain. So if you go inside this Bristol Farms, they actually have a few of the booths, they still have a little bit of the Chasens setup, and they have a plaque remembering that Chasens was here. Let's check this out. It's a chair with a clock and a book and a coffee cup on it. And then right on the other side of this outdoor area is where the memorial to Chasens is. You can kind of see those wooden shutters right there. Pretty cool. And it's cool to think that even after Dave passed away, Maude ran this place as long as she could. This was an establishment that was open for almost 60 years. I mean, think of that, from 1936 to 1995. Pretty much any time you came here, you would have had a fantastic, elegant, fine dining experience with any myriad of celebrities could have been sitting around you. Now let's go inside. Actually, I'll show you the plaque first, but we'll go inside and see what the old Chasens look like. How cool is that? A legendary Hollywood haunt, 1936-1995. Through its doors on Beverly Boulevard walked movie stars and moguls, dignitaries and presidents. They came to see and be seen and to enjoy Dave Chasen's world-famous chili. The main dining room and street facade of the original restaurant remain. So let's take a look. Look at that. Isn't that awesome? Jimmy Stewart also used to frequent here. There's actually a picture right here in the corner of Jimmy Stewart, and to the right of him was Dave Chasen and Maude Chasen. And there's Humphrey Bogart, Frank Sinatra. I forget who the guy right there in the center is. Isn't that cool that they... Yeah, apparently the city fought to have some of this preserved. And the actual Ronald Reagan and Nancy booth is in the Presidential Library in Simi Valley. There's the old Chasens kitchen. Then there's Jack Webb from Dragnet. And this is actually just like a lunchroom now. Anybody that shops at Bristol Farms can come here and use it as an eatery, so it's practical too. So where the grocery store is now, this would have all been the dining room of Chasens. Pretty crazy. And up on the wall are more pictures of people at Chasens. There's Alfred Hitchcock, actually. They said he used to come here every Thursday. Yep, this would have all been Chasens. Isn't that nuts? This is newer. The last time I was here, this wasn't here. I love that. 1936 when he opened it. Just that little shack, a little southern barbecue place. Closed in 95 because just no fine dining people left. Bristol Farms, West Hollywood nurtures the same cordial, friendly atmosphere of Dave Chasen's successful restaurant while maintaining the same commitment to the culinary excellence. Very cool. And that is it, man. That is the original archway, the original front of Chasens, and I'll show you something else. If you look right up there in the bricks pretty closely, you can see where they have puttied over 4 dots that were right there, and that's where the old Chasens sign used to sit slanted right across there. So if you look very closely, I know you'll be able to see it. Now there was talk at one point of having some sort of Chasens museum opened, but I guess it never really happened, or the extent of what we'll ever have is what we have here. Which I'm cool with, you know. They didn't demolish the building, at least we have that. I just wish they would have put the plaque right here. Like, you know, why not right outside the red carpeted entryway, right where everybody drove up? Why not right here? Now that would have been the old Chasens takeout window, I was told. And one of the other funny stories I've always associated with Chasens is kind of, you know, like I mentioned, not a lot of young people came here. But one instance that was tied to this was that when the Monkees TV show was about to come out and they were getting ready to, you know, release and everything, they did a promo gig here for like all the executives, and apparently the executives were like much older, and the guys showed up here kind of high and kind of drunk and just young 20s, rambunctious and everything, and they almost didn't have a show because of what happened here. They said that they just didn't mesh well with the execs at all. Well, that's it. 9039 Beverly will now always be Bristol Farms, and those of us that watch this channel will know it was always Chasens. And I believe these are the same lamp poles and everything that were here when Chasens was here. And I love that if you go to the other side of the entryway, they actually have the doors, or they have swinging doors that are right there that make you feel like you just walked in. See, if I'd never been to Hollywood and I were gonna make a trip out here as a first timer, these are the kind of places I would actually be wanting to see, and I would tell people to go see. It's like, come see the crazy grocery store that used to be Chasens and experience a little bit of Chasens while you're here. I always think of it because I think of in That Thing You Do when the record executives walking out like, hey, we saw you at Chasens with Suzanne Plachette. So Dave and Maude Chasen are buried in Forest Lawn, Glendale, in a private section of the cemetery. Actually the same section where Humphrey Bogart and Mary Pickford are buried, so we're gonna go visit them now. We're up to the top of Forest Lawn again. We're gonna be going in this special secret area. Be checking out Mary Pickford's grave. Right down here is where Dave Chasen and Maude Chasen, Chasens restaurant, are buried. Dave Chasen, who was born in, at the time it was Russia, now it would be the Ukraine, and was brought to the USA when he was 8 years old, was raised in Port Chester, New York, and took off in 1920 to start his career in vaudeville. He was a straight man to a famous comic named Joe Cook, and eventually ended up on Broadway from 1922 to 1933, where he would eventually then end up in movies. And then, at the advice of his pal Frank Capra, Frank told him he should open a restaurant. So first it was the Southern Pit was the name of it, and it was in West Los Angeles. And it basically was just the chili and a few things on the menu. But he also, when he started, didn't have much, so he accepted a $3,000 loan and borrowed Mr. Frank Capra's silverware in order to open his restaurant. His early patrons for the restaurant were Charles Lindbergh, Clark Gable, Joan Crawford, even Eleanor Roosevelt. Eventually he would move the restaurant. It would become the Chasens that we would know the history of, this place where you could go and rub shoulders with celebrities. You could see Jimmy Stewart there, you could see Elizabeth Taylor, even FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover would be a guest there pretty frequently, and even presented Dave Chasen with a porcelain casting of his fingerprints for Christmas. Said that he had taken one of the drinking glasses that Dave had touched and had that gift made. Kind of a crazy thing. Said that Richard Nixon would come there for the hobo steak, and eventually when the World War II broke out, Dave would decide to go off and entertain the troops for a short time, and that's where Maude took over. As I mentioned earlier, Maude was brought there on a date with Don Amici. She couldn't understand why he loved that place so much, and then eventually, not only did she love it, but it would almost become her life, because while Dave would go off entertaining the troops, Maude would take over the operations, and then Dave would come back, they would work together, have an office together, and then sadly, Dave's health started to decline, and Maude decided to take over the operation and run it exactly as Dave wanted it ran, and ran it until, along with, I believe, her daughter came into the picture much later, but ran it until they closed in 1995. So here buried together are Dave Chasen, Maude Chasen, and as we saw today, at least a little bit of the history is acknowledged still in Hollywood. You can go in and feel like you're in Chasens, get that experience. The chili recipe that everyone loved, Elizabeth Taylor would have flown to where she was filming Cleopatra. That chili recipe is now out floating amongst the world. You can make it yourself, and kind of a nice thing. Nice to remember the man and the woman that made Chasens what it was. Rest in peace, both Dave Chasen and Maude Chasen. Well, we got a little bit of a bummer. Unfortunately, even though I said we're going to go to the Reagan Library and see the booth, it was the Ronald and Nancy Reagan booth. I talked to my contact there because I am going out to film something else out there. And they said that the booth is actually in storage right now, so they can show some other things for the time being. So we just can't do it today, and they don't allow photography in the storage area. So hopefully in the future we'll be able to see it. But hope you enjoyed our Chasens history today. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. Have a great night and good night.